games. Whoop, let's go. Hursty games, and this how we do. Now it's time we team up.
Hey there guys, welcome back to Hursty Games and welcome to one of our first proper videos on FIFA 20, and today we are going to be looking at some potential investments for the confirmed first player of the month, POTM Pukki, which looks like a card I really want to use. The card looks like a lot of fun, really well deserved as well. I think it's 6 goals in 5 games the guy's got. He's doing incredibly well. He's doing absolute bits over at Norwich, so fair play to him. But today we're going to look at some of the cards that I would suggest maybe looking at investing in when sort of the early access comes out, if you've got the early access, or when you're first in the game. Cards I think it'll be worth looking to try and pick up, either to invest in buying the Pukki yourself, or maybe to try and make some coins. Buy those cards to sell on, because they might be worth a little bit more when the actual SBC itself comes out. So these are just some of my suggestions. I've kind of tried to cover every single base, all of the things that sort of EA normally try and mix in there with sort of player of the month investment guides and all this kind of stuff, or I should say like SBCs, the kind of SBCs they normally release with these cards. So without further ado, let's just get into it, and hopefully this helps. Okay, so with this first group of players, I've tried to cover 2 bases. Firstly, I've covered players from Norwich, current Norwich players, and secondly, I've covered players from Finland. So obviously Norwich being the team that Pukki plays at, there's a high chance that there could be a Norwich-based SBC. You might need 1, 2, 3 players from Norwich. It could mean you need a full 11. That would surprise me, but my thought process is normally they require 2 or 3 players from a certain league, team or nation is what they tend to kind of cover with. With the slightly cheaper SBCs, I do reckon this is going to be on the cheaper side of things. So to start off with the players from Norwich I've looked at, I've got with Tim Krul. They've only got 2 goalkeepers when I looked at it, Farman and Krul. I think Krul will be a little bit cheaper, only 73 rated. Firstly, I do think he should have got a higher rated card, but we'll get into that another time. But 73 rating. I think Farman's going to be a little bit pricier, because I think a lot of people are going to look to pick him up for their starter teams as a sort of semi-OP looking goalkeeper. He's been OP in previous years. I think Tim Krul could be a little bit on that cheap if you can pick him up fairly well. Now McLean, I've looked at him because they have got a lot of players in the centre mid or sort of central midfielder position. They've got a couple of cams, a couple of CDMs, but like 4 centre mids. So it's a highly saturated position. So it's a higher chance of the centre mids being that little bit cheaper, just because there's more of them. McLean is just the one I picked out just because his stats didn't look quite as favourable as the others. So maybe he's a little bit cheaper just for that reason. But otherwise, I would look at Norwich centre mids, because I do think they're going to be a tad cheaper. And then I've picked their strike force of Pukki and Dermich up top. Pukki will probably be quite pricey because he covers a lot of bases for what obviously there could be SBCs for. Premier League, you've got Norwich obviously directly, and you've obviously got Finland, so he covers a lot of bases, so there's a high chance he's going to be quite inflated in price. If you can find one cheap, but people just listing them because maybe they don't know too much about what player of the month is, or they haven't looked to invest for it, and they just start kind of listing them up cheap because they think, oh, I can get 500-600 coins for this guy. Definitely be on the lookout for Pukki, because if you can snipe him, you'll make yourself a lot of coins, or save yourself a lot of coins if you put him in. And again, Dermich, just another non-rare. They didn't have too many like gold rated cards, but Dermich was one of them, and I thought, you never know, you can try and pick him up. If a lot of people are looking for Pukki, Dermich could be that little bit cheaper. The other players here are all from Finland. Hursty, pinch of salt, 83 rated. Could be a little bit more inflated because he could be useful for other SBCs just because he's high rated, so bear that in mind. Moisander, obviously being a rare, his price could go up a little bit, but his card stats aren't massively favourable to be used in many teams, so he could be cheap for that reason. And Raitala, the guy on the left centre back, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, apologies to anyone that I'm saying it wrong for. Again, rare, take that with a pinch of salt as well, because you never know, rare cards can go through the roof sometimes, just how the market works. The other 3 midfielders, the 3 Finnish midfielders, price-wise, it's going to be a little bit sporadic. You don't know. I picked a lot of the MLS ones because obviously it's a lot of good links. So if you end up getting a couple of them from those kind of those links, so the left mid and that centre-back, for example, that's going to be a lot of free chemistry, and you can afford to do slightly other things with the rest of the squad if the requirements allow for it. Kamara, definitely worth sort of paying attention to, because we'll get into it in a little bit, but Pukki actually played for Celtic. So having a Finnish player from the Scottish League could potentially help with a couple of different SBCs. He covers the Finnish one, he covers the Scottish League one if they have something to do with Celtic. So it covers a lot of bases. So Kamara is a very good one to pick up if you can pick him up for cheap, and if he slips under the radar just a little bit. The second SBC I have looked at, to start off with, I've looked at Brøndby players. That is where Pukki came from. I think it was on a free to Norwich, but he came from Brøndby. That was the team he went to. Again, I've looked at positions that are highly saturated. Goalkeepers, they had 3. So they had 3 goalkeepers. I picked up Tornes, is how I've said that. Bronze cards are a bit tricky to kind of predict their ratings, or not ratings, sorry, their prices, because bronze packs could be opened quite frequently by some people to trade, but bronze packs otherwise are kind of left and ignored because you don't tend to use bronze players in your teams very often, so it's highly unlikely that many people will be opening them unless they're looking to trade. So if you can pick up one of their goalkeepers, you're doing bits. Same with the centre-back, that Hemanson, I'm probably saying it wrong, picked him up because they had a few centre-backs. Tibbling and Fisker, they had a lot of centre mids. They had about 4 or 5 central midfield players. Those were 2 of the ones I thought would be cheapest. Tibbling is the highest rated centre mid. Fisker, there's another guy as well who's the same rating as him and has a fairly similar looking card, but the other guy's stats were better, so I went with Fisker again, the off chance he could be a tad cheaper. And Urkej, however that's said, sorry. There were 2 or 3 strikers. Again, he was a non-rare and was silver, so I just thought pick him up. The rest of the players are from the same league as Brøndby, but are Finnish players. So again, that covers 2 bases. If you're looking, there's a Brøndby SBC and it requires 11 players from that league but only a few from Brøndby, you can pick up some of these guys and they can also help you with the Finnish SBC if this SBC doesn't end up existing. That's kind of what I'm trying to run with a lot of these. I'm trying to find some cards that cover more than one basis, so you've got yourself covered in case you buy a card. Oh, Finnish card's going to be really, really useful. They end up not having a Finnish SBC, but they have one for the league for Brøndby. Then you're covering 2 different leagues and it could work out quite well for you. So that's one thing I would definitely recommend looking at these players here, because it covers both bases. And if for nothing else, you've got to pick up a 53 rated Ant-Man. I don't know if that's how it's said, but his name is Ant-Man. You can't go wrong. The next SBC is 2 of the teams that he also previously played for. As I mentioned before, Celtic, and he played for Schalke for a short period of time as well. He played there for like a season or so. So those are 2 teams that I've looked at. Again, I've looked at saturated positions for the majority of these. Nubel, I think is how that's said. He's non-rare. He's their only goalkeeper. They had a couple of lower rated goalkeepers, but I just think because, again, he's not massively favourable stats-wise, he could be a tad cheaper. I've gone for Bergstaller and Uth as the strikers because they're 2 non-rare strikers. Either one of those could end up being on the cheaper side. And I went for Omar Mascaral. He could be very useful for SBCs because he's Spanish in the Bundesliga. Bear that in mind. His price could be slightly inflated for that reason. But otherwise, he's one of their centre midfielders. And again, I think he'll be one of the slightly cheaper ones because the other ones were rare. So that's why I picked him. But just bear in mind that he has got a league and nation that are very different and will help with hybrid teams. Then the Scottish League players, aka the Celtic League players, pick up those gold cards. I genuinely think McGregor, Rogic, Brown and Christie are going to make you bank. I think honestly not many people are going to look to buy these. Not many people run Scottish League teams to sort of play throughout the whole of FIFA, so often their cards are fairly cheap until their League SBC comes out. If you pick up these cards and they don't go up in price, you can either then flip them on fairly quickly and try and make your money back. Otherwise, save them for the Scottish League SBC. Yes, it's probably going to be a long way away, but they will go up massively in price then. But I do genuinely think Celtic and or Schalke will be one of the SBCs. This one I'm fairly confident in that one of these teams at least will get picked. So I would say the gold rated Celtic players here are very good to pick up. I put Bitten in because, as you can see, there are like 3 CDMs on this page alone. It's a fairly saturated position, so Bitten might be a fairly decent one to pick up. Connell, for the same reason. CDM could be quite cheap, only bronze. And then Hayes on the left-hand side, they've got a couple of left mids. They've got like Sinclair, they've got quite a few wingers, so I went with Hayes just because I reckon he's going to be slightly on the cheap as well. But this one, especially the Celtic team, I'm fairly confident this will be in the SBC. The next squad, I've gone with a BPL squad, but specifically teams that Pukki scored against. So he scored a goal against Chelsea, a goal against Liverpool, and he got a hat-trick against Newcastle. This is probably, again, fairly likely that they'll include at least a couple of these teams. I'd be incredibly surprised if Newcastle has not got something to do with this SBC at the fact he scored a hat-trick against them. That would surprise me massively. But getting into it, Loftus-Cheek, Van Ginkel, 2 centre mids, non-rares, there aren't too many non-rare players in the Chelsea team, but they had 3 midfielders. Loftus-Cheek and Van Ginkel being them, I think they'll be on the cheaper. Caballero, I don't think it's going to be massively used. Obviously, Kepa being the only other keeper that they've got, but I think Caballero will be on the cheap. The Liverpool players were pretty tough. They have 4 non-rare gold cards. That's it. They have barely any non-rare cards at all, especially in gold. They've only got the 4. Lallana, Adrian and Lovren, being 3 of them. Lallana, I think out of those will be the cheapest. Then I would say Adrian. I think Lovren will be a tad pricier. So again, kind of take that one as it is and look at that one definitely before you look directly to invest in Lovren. But I think Lallana will be a good one to pick up because I don't think his card will be too expensive. He's only got 1 or 2 decent stats, and that's passing and dribbling. And then Adrian, I think, is just going to be cheap. I don't think he's going to be too expensive in the grand scheme of things. Again, even though he's Spanish in the Prem, that's the only thing to bear in mind. He could be pricey for that reason alone. The Newcastle players, much easier for me to pick out. Strikers, they had about three or four non-rare strikers. Carroll and Muto for me are definitely 2 best options. Jonathan might potentially get a one to watch, so I'd steer clear of him. I went for Carroll and I went for Muto because I think they'll be the cheap ones, especially Carroll. I'd be very surprised if Carroll is much more than 1,000 coins after a couple of days in the game. And then Ki Sung-yueng and Shelby, again, non-rare midfielders. They were highly saturated at Newcastle, so they've got a lot of non-rare gold midfielders. So Shelby and Ki Sung-yueng were the ones I picked out. Again, not massively favourable looking cards, and I think they'll be on the cheap. And then Lascelles, pretty slow, with only that 59 pace. A nice looking card, but I don't think he's going to be massively expensive. So he's the final player from Newcastle I'd invest in. Again, fairly confident you'll need at least something from this team. If I was to pick one out of these 3 teams that you'll need, it would be Newcastle because he scored a hat-trick. And this is the final set of players, the final squad. This one I'm not massively confident on, but EA could really throw a curveball out there by including either of these 2 teams. Firstly, Sevilla. Pukki played 1 game for Sevilla. He was at Sevilla, I think, for a season. I think he played for like their second team or something for a little while. It was quite early on in his career, but he played 1 game for Sevilla. If I know EA, they will try and do what they can to throw us off the scent, to try and confuse us and send us in the wrong direction. If they made one for Sevilla, I'd be very surprised. But just in case, I have picked a couple of cards out that I think will be slightly on the cheap. Juan Jordan, I don't know how it's said, will be slightly cheaper in my opinion. Not massively desirable card, and again, a highly saturated position for Sevilla. Nolito, not a very good looking card for a winger, so I put him in there. And Dabour, out of their 2 new strikers, him and De Jong being an 82 rated and non-rare as well. I don't think De Jong is going to be massively expensive, but I think he'll be a bit more expensive than Dabour, so I picked Dabour. The other players here are from the Finnish league. I think the team is called HRJ. I might be wrong. I apologise if that is. But that is one of the first teams that Pukki played for. Again, because it's in the game, in the Finnish league, I'd be very surprised if they included it. But there is a chance this team could be included in the SBC. So I picked a couple of the players from the slightly more saturated positions. I'm not going to try and say their names, but you can see I picked 3 central players, 2 CMs and a CDM. They had a lot of midfielders there. O'Shaughnessy, I feel like I have a good chance of saying because that sounds somewhat British. I've got a good chance there. Again, centre-backs were slightly inflated, and there were about 4 goalkeepers, so any of the goalkeepers you can look at picking up, but they had a very low-rated squad, so the fact that they had bronze players goes to show if this is included, that one could be a tad pricier because there's not going to be many of these cards. They could be a bit hard to get your hands onto. And if that is the case and you do invest in it, you'll make a lot of coins. But if you do invest in it and it's not included, then there's a very difficult chance of you actually making coins back on that one. So this page here is a very unlikely page, but I thought I'd include it just in case. It's information that you guys might not have known. I had no idea he played at Sevilla. I didn't even know the guy played at Celtic. That's how little my knowledge was of Pukki before he came to Norwich. But hopefully this one isn't included. But if it is, hopefully it helps. But that, guys, is that. That is my list of potential investments for the Player of the Month, Pukki. Hopefully this is helpful. Of course, if you found it helpful, then please do leave a like. It would mean the absolute world to me. Leave a comment down below to let me know if there's any other players that you would think about investing in or any other requirements you think I've missed. One thing I will say, there might be something like an 83 rated squad or an 84 rated squad. It's hard for me at this point to predict which 83 rateds are going to be the cheapest. That's not something I can necessarily try and work out now without literally sitting and looking for hours comparing stats, looking at leagues, looking at nations, and looking at every single 83 to 84 rated card in the game. But that's not something I can do right now. If it's something you guys want to see as a guide in the future, I'll try and sort that thing out. But for now, I think these are the more specific investments for Pukki and are a lot more helpful. So definitely let me know if that's something you want to see in the future and if this helped. Of course, subscribe if you're new around here. It will mean the absolute world. We hit 3K not too long ago. And I'd really appreciate the support. We've got a 24-hour stream coming on the 24th, the first day of the 3-day early access for FIFA 20. I'm very excited and I hope to see all of you guys there. But for now, boys, I'm going to say a massive thank you for watching. And of course, above all else, look after yourselves.
Hursty
See you
Games. Whoop. Let's go. Hursty Games, and this how we do. Now it's time we team up. Check them online, you might catch them playing FIFA. Hey, yeah, you know we keep it live. Make sure to give a like and subscribe. Gaming channel, what's the best one? Keep it hella dope, hella fresh, huh? Yeah, Hursty Games, tune in. Even told my grandmama, sister, and my best friend. You might want to check them if you want to be entertained. You already know the name. Check us out, Hursty Games. Hey, whoop. Make sure to give a like and subscribe.